is something that many people fear, but for me it has always been my biggest fear. As a Form 5 science stream student who has always excelled academically, the thought of failing terrifies me. I've always been the kind of person who strives for perfection in my studies. I feel a lot of pressure to do well because everyone, including my teachers, friends, and family, expects me to succeed. I was walking in the bookstore when I stumbled upon a book with a very cheap price. Because of this book, I am sitting here today to share my book review. My name is Brenda Lim Soo Chi and I am from SM Saint Denis and my school code is WFE1022. The book I am sharing about today is entitled Philosophy by Elizabeth Day. I feel about the title as how does one reinterpret the word philosophy into philosophy. But when I read this book, it really changed the way I see failure. This book taught me that failure is not the end of the world, but rather a lesson that helps us grow. Philosophy is a self-help book that focuses on the idea that failure is an important part of success. Elizabeth Day, the author, shares her own experiences with failure and what she has learned from them. She also invited many famous people to her podcast and received advice from them who have failed in different ways but managed to learn from their mistakes. The book is based on 7 principles of failure which help readers understand that failing is not something to be ashamed of. Instead, it is a chance to improve and learn. One of the biggest lessons I learned about this book is that failure is not personal. Sometimes when we fail, we think that we are not good enough or that we are not capable. But in reality, failure is just a part of life. Elizabeth Day explains that everyone fails at some point and it does not define who we are. This was a very powerful message for me because I have always been afraid that failing would mean I was not smart anymore. However, after reading this book, I realized that even the most successful people have failed before reaching success. This made me feel more confident about facing challenges in my studies. Another important lesson from philosophy is that failure helps us learn and grow. Before reading this book, I used to think that failure was something bad and that I should avoid it at all costs. But Elizabeth Day explains that failing teaches us important lessons that we would not have learned otherwise. For example, if I fail a test instead of feeling like a failure, I should see it as a chance to improve and do better next time. This lesson made me change my perspective on failure and see it as a stepping stone to success rather than something to be afraid of. One part of the book that really stood out to me was when Elizabeth Day talked about resilience. She explains that resilience is the ability to keep going even after experiencing failure. This was very inspiring to me because I sometimes feel like giving up when things get too difficult. As a science stream student, I have a lot of difficult subjects like physics, chemistry, and biology. Sometimes when I do not understand a topic, I feel frustrated and scared that I will fail. But after reading this book, I learned that struggling with something does not mean I am failing. It just means I am learning. This made me more motivated to keep trying even when things get tough. The book also helped me understand that failure does not mean that we should stop trying. Elizabeth Day shares many stories of people who failed multiple times before achieving success. For example, she talks about famous people like Oprah Winfrey and J.K. Rowling, who faced many failures before they became successful. This reminded me that just because I fail once does not mean I will never succeed. I now understand that success takes time and effort, and failure is just a part of the journey. Overall, Philosophy by Elizabeth Day has had a big impact on my life. It has helped me see failure in a new way and has made me feel less afraid of making mistakes. I have learned that failure is a normal part of life and that it does not define me. Instead, it is an opportunity to grow and become better. This book has given me more confidence to face challenges, not just in my studies, but in life as well. Would I recommend this book? Absolutely, without a doubt. I would highly recommend this book to anyone who is afraid of failure, especially students like me who feel a lot of pressure to succeed. It is a book that teaches valuable life lessons and reminds us that failure is not something to fear, but something to learn from. Give it a read and thank you for your time.